The new Warframe Devstream number 195 just concluded, and they have hyped it up quite a bit over the last couple of days. But man, did they deliver. We got a freaking lore bomb regarding the next update, brand new Incarnons, new Protoframe skins, Railjack update, Nidus Rework, a lot of quality of life, and so much more. Big shoutouts to all our generous channel members, and now, let's listen to an overcaffeinated MHBlacky yap way too long about all the new stuff. But okay, let's first of all calm a little bit down and go over housekeeping with a couple of dates and interesting things that you might want to know. The first of which being that on May the 4th, enter Star Wars joke here, Operation Belly of the Beast is gonna return, and on the same day we're gonna get another nice drop, and that would be the TennoCon Digital Pack. You know, TennoCon happens in July, and the TennoCon Digital Pack will be available from May the 4th. This time, inside the pack, we're gonna get the Hun Hullis ephemera, which you see in the background right now, sentient vibes, and overall quite nice. There is also going to be a new TennoCon mode, which might have some lore implications. If I'm not mistaken, I'm seeing 2 stars there, which probably has to do with the Tau system, of which we already know that it is a double star system. And thirdly, there's also going to be the Riftguard Syandana. This will be available via Varzia Dax, or if you own the TennoCon 2025 pack, then you will just get it automatically. On top of the digital stuff, they also showed one physical merch piece that will be available at TennoCon, and that will be this nice and beautiful Nidus statue. I think they're gonna sell out in the first 5 minutes, so, you know, if you want one of those, try to be early. Okay, agenda point number 2 on today's list would be Mesa Heirloom. We've already seen concept art of her before, and given that she is coming relatively soon, we now got our eyes on how she looks in-game, and let me just say, I'm kinda getting scared that whatever the next heirloom skin will be, will probably get my videos demonetized, so DE, please, think about your fellow creators. But no, jokes aside, of course, Mesa Heirloom shows quite a lot of skin, but if that's not to your liking, there will also be a jacket that you can put over her to make her look Peggy 12 again. On top of that, I was also very pleased to hear that she will get a special signa in the form of a cowboy hat. That's of course very much her identity, so it's good that they brought that in. As for when the heirloom is gonna release, they didn't give a specific date yet. It's not gonna be with the next update. They said it's gonna be round about TennoCon-ish. I think also last year we had a heirloom release round about TennoCon, so kinda sorta expect something like that. And as always, if you could leave a quick like for the video, that would be super helpful, because it helps bring this info to more Tenno out there. So thank you so much for your support. But let's now finally get to the point that you've all eagerly been waiting for, the next big Warframe update. First of all, one thing I want to say here is they did not give a release date yet. However, if we know the Warframe update structure, it would be likely to assume it's going to be somewhere in mid-June. However, one thing we do have is the title of this update, and that is actually very revealing, going by Jade Shadows Constellations. Yes, that's right, baby, we get a sequel to the Jade Shadows story quest. In fact, this entire update is actually going to be very heavily story-inspired, so let's get into the details. First of all, we of course going to have the big new story quest, the sequel to the Jade Shadows quest. If you want to play that, they already said you will have to have the first Jade Shadows quest already complete, and I just have to say it, the trailer that you're seeing in the background, boy, they have some very sick promotional material going on, and we're gonna get into who these characters are and what all of this has to do with the quest in just about a second. Beforehand though, just a little bit of appreciative meta discussion. This animation again is made by The Line, you know, the people that are also responsible for the super sick 1999 animated trailer. And if you care a lot about the art side of things, then I would definitely recommend that you check out the VOD of the dev stream, because they also had a little bit of a quote-unquote interview or like Q&A session with Louv from The Line, where he's talking a little bit about the creative process and what went into that. Check it out later. But okay, let's get into the story and what was revealed so far. This battle that is taking place in the background right here happens in the Orb Valleys, and we can also very briefly see a much sought after entity in the form of the third orb. If you've been with the Warframe community for a while, then you know we have the 2 big spider orbs in the orb valleys, and there was always this 3rd orb which nobody ever talked about and it just didn't do anything. Well, we now kinda sorta have integrated that in the lore by just blowing it up in the trailer, right? The 3rd orb is now kinda sorta canonically dead. I'm sorry. The characters, though, that are fighting here, they're called Ryoku and Vina, and those 2 are gonna be the brand new Protoframes about whom we're gonna talk in just a minute. If you're wondering why 2 Protoframes are fighting each other, well, that has actually to do with the overall story framework of this mission, which takes place in the future in a parallel part of the Eternalism universe. In this future, Jade's children are born. She has 2 boys called Sirius and Orion, and Ryoku and Vina are sort of the 2 mentors of the 2 boys, which kind of sort of makes them rivals and fight over it. They didn't specify anything here, you know, we gotta play the story quest ourselves, but that is sort of the underlying conflict here. They also mentioned that as part of this story, we're gonna have to find Stalker, the father, to resolve some issues, but really, there are so many questions left open that, you know, we're just gonna have to play the quest ourselves. Just one additional thing that they mentioned, I don't know if they really meant it or if it was more seen as a joke, but they did say that now that the 3rd orb is dead and splattered all over the orb valleys, that we might be able to find some Garuda lore inside those body pieces that are gonna be scattered all over the place. So yeah, everybody who was asking for Garuda lore, there might be something coming. So much for the story side of things though. Let's next talk about the big elephant in the room, and that would of course be the 2 new Protoframes. Ryoku is going to be Proto-Ash, and Vina will be Proto-Garuda. Those 2 were definitely Protoframes that I did not expect, but dang man, they do look very, very cool. The devs did show a lot of fashion options and color variations on Devstream already in the in-game version, so I put you some of this in the background right now. In general, they're continuing the idea of having a lot of customization options and different clothing pieces that you can put on and off depending on your personal preference. For example, Ash has this cape that you can take on or off. Proto-Garuda also has this sort of puffer jacket thing that you can take on or off, and in general I find these 2 character looks very, very cool. Gives me kind of sort of a cyberpunky vibe, especially Proto-Ash. I mean, it kind of looks like they really wanted to recreate Takamura, I think that was his name, from Cyberpunk. But hey, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, okay? Guy was one of my favorite characters. However, there is one big question that I know all of you are having right now, and that would be, of course, are they romanceable? And the short answer is absolutely not. There are going to be story implications. They said that those 2 Protoframes are going to be more attached to the respective children of Jade and therefore not available for the Drifter. However, there is one very creative thing that you can reach with them if you have enough Riz, and that would be you can make them part of your Railjack crew. Which very neatly leads us over to the next topic, and that would be something that I totally didn't expect, a Railjack content update. Yep, baby, that's right, we're gonna get more Railjack content before GTA 6. And before I made a Railjack guide, but anyway, let's talk about that for a second. Once you have the new Jade Shadows quest finished, there will be a new planet on the Railjack star map in the form of Uranus. In the Uranus Proxima, you're gonna have 3 nodes. The middle one is gonna be sort of a social space, I think probably something like a relay or whatever, with the 2 other nodes being 2 fully fledged Railjack missions. And those Railjack missions then will be tied to the 2 new Protoframes. See, the idea here is that both Proto-Ash as well as Proto-Garuda both have a captured Corpus ship under their control that you will have to board as part of a full Railjack mission. That means you're not going to just be on the ship, but that you're going to have to do the usual, you know, do the Railjack mission first and then at the end, board the ship and do an onboard mission there. The cool thing here is, and we also saw a bit of gameplay about it, that those 2 Corpus ships are going to be designed a little bit in the style of the respective Protoframe, where we're going to have some eerie lighting here on Proto-Ash's ship, and of course on the ship of Blood Queen Garuda, like that thing is basically using blood as fuel. Those I think will be very atmospheric missions. They also did showcase the 2 new Protoframe emotes that you're gonna get when you transition between Protoframe skin and normal skin for both of the 2 Warframes. I think they're very cool, very gory. 2026 is like the gore year of Warframe or something. But if you like that type of stuff, then you will probably like those animations. But alright, up next, let's talk about one of the most popular and the most overpowered Warframes in the roster, and that would be Owl Wizard Dante. For ages, and that means basically since his release day, people have been asking for a deluxe skin because everybody likes to play him, but apparently nobody likes to look at the man. And now finally, the devs have heard us. This right here is Dante Deluxe, a brand new deluxe skin coming, I think they said, with the Jade Shadows update in June, and also here they did show different color palettes and variations. One thing that is very cool and that I want to highlight here is that you can remove this sort of wing cape on his back, either completely or just on one side. So if you want to have the deluxe skin, but you rather want to have some of your own shoulder pieces, then to me it looks like this is probably going to be very easily possible. Like his shoulders under the cape look like they're very friendly for a lot of different shoulder pieces in the game. Overall, I think this deluxe skin looks pretty cool, and also the color palette and color allocation seems like you're going to be able to make some nice fashion frame out of it. I personally though am not the biggest fan of his like flat face with the one eye, so maybe I try to mix and match something with his default helmet, see if that works, but hey, fashion is in the eye of the onlooker anyway. Together with this Dante Deluxe skin though, we're also gonna get 2 deluxe weapon skins, which would be the Noctua Deluxe for his, exalted Noctua weapon, and another Warfan skin that you can also see in the background right here. This one also works for any other Warfan in the game. However, now that we're already talking about deluxe skins, there is one note that they mentioned, which would be that the announced Baruch Deluxe skin, that's unfortunately not going to launch with this upcoming update because they say they have so much on their plate and didn't have the time to finish it before the release. But I would hope that Baruch Deluxe will hopefully still launch this year. Next, another feature coming with the June update would be 5 new Incarnons. I'm gonna make this short because we already had the announcement for those, I think it was in the last dev stream, and they also didn't give us any new information about those guns, not even in-game footage. So I'm gonna make it short. We're gonna have the Ballistica Incarnon, the Streza Incarnon, Obex Incarnon, Vectis Incarnon, and the almighty Stug Incarnon. If you haven't heard about it yet, yes, they're really gonna give the Stug an Incarnon mode, and I am very, very hyped to try out what that thing can do with the Incarnon. The next point on the agenda though, that was something that I really didn't expect. However, I'm sure a lot of you will be very hyped about it. And that would be that Nidus, the infested Warframe, is gonna get a rework, or the way that Pablo said, a slight retouch. From what he mentioned though, I kinda sorta would say it is somewhere between a light touch-up and a fully fledged rework. There's some very nice changes in there is what I'm trying to say. Now, usually for these touch-ups or reworks, Pablo likes to make a video where he shows and explains the changes in the dev kit, but unfortunately we didn't get any of that today in the stream, so he was just, talking about it without footage, which is why what you're about to see in the background is just old footage from my Nidus skill overview and doesn't directly have anything to do with what is being said. Just wanted to clarify that ahead of time. But with that being said, I'm gonna give it to the man himself and let Pablo explain what will change about Nidus.
That's all good. So we're basically buffing his health and health regen. He already has some from like the rank ups. We're increasing the stacks on the passive to be by default 200, and then if you have the augment, they go all the way to 500. And now when you do the one, basically there's lingering spikes that stay after. Well, I guess that's what lingering means. You now have a larger amount of stacks, and you can also build them faster. We fix how they go down ramps and stuff like that because they used to
augment.
The augment. Yeah, we basically increase that's just a numeric increase on the stats. Larva can now be recast. It just undoes the previous one. So if you pull someone and they got stuck somewhere, now you can just recast it to start a new one. The mutation stacks that they give you used to be at a fixed percentage. Now that scales with strength, if I remember correctly. And then we buffed the augment for it. Then for his third, we removed the cost of linking because we saw that a lot of players do it at the very beginning of the mission when they don't have stacks. They want to do it on their friends when they're standing right next to them. We added a Gray Spirit. Basically, if you get further than the distance, you have like a little bit to get back in range, get back on the leash before it disconnects, so you got a little bit of a notice there. And now you can put it on your free-moving companions, which basically means your Kubras and stuff, sort of like that augment from... And finally, Ravenous. This one is the one I teased on the dev shirt. Before, we couldn't actually increase the range because performance would just tank. But now, a decade later, we have the power of improved decals. It clears the status if you're standing on it, and just like improved numbers. And then we also tweaked the AI of the maggots, so that they basically seek out targets better. Similar to what we did with Boban, where the little roller balls now seek out enemies better. Yeah, that's a Nidus retouch.
So yeah, overall, I think Nidus was already a very strong Warframe, but these changes really fixed the biggest problems that people were still having with him. Specifically the fact that you can now recast Larva. That's such a big bonus, because beforehand we had to use the augment for Larva, not for the augment's sake, but just so that we can actually recast it. This will open up an additional mod slot on a lot of builds, which changes quite a bit, and probably once those changes apply, I might make an updated Nidus guide. The next agenda point would be quality of life. And before you click away, right, I know quality of life is not the most flashy topic, but there are some genuinely nice things that they said here. So let's check it out. First of all, we're gonna get a graphical update for the Corpus ship tile set. There's not going to be like a big remodel happening or anything, but just like with the Grineer asteroid base relighting that they've showed us a while ago, they're now going to extend this relighting technique to the Corpus ship as well. They didn't show any footage before or after of the changes, however, I would assume that this will likely go into the same direction of how the ships looked in the gameplay scenes from the 2 new Protoframes. Next, and this is a big one for everybody who likes big bulky fashion frame, there will be a new setting for camera offset. See, the big issue with a lot of fashion frame and also some weapons is that if the model is really big on your Warframe, it might just obstruct the camera a bit too much to be comfortable. Going forward though, there will be 2 camera offset settings to manage the clutter a bit. With the one setting that you see in the background right now, your character is just going to be moved to the side a little bit more to free up some space in the middle of the screen. And then there's also going to be a more extreme setting where your character is going to be shrunk down and placed much lower on screen to give you even more real estate in the middle. They said that like for 95% of cases, the first option is probably the way to go, but if you have some really extensive fashion frame, then at least there is a second option. Next, we have a bit of a small point, and that would be unified knockdown animations. In the past, as you can also see in the background, there were 2 different animations for either being knocked down by an enemy versus being knocked down by like an explosion that you cause yourself. Going forward, they're going to change it that every knockdown animation will be the one that you usually have from the self-knockdown, and also they said that there has always been like a very short time window that you can press a button to recover faster from the knockdown, and they said that they massively expanded this time window so that going forward it's going to be easier to recover from knockdowns. Now, is this going to be a big deal? I personally think no, because most of us use Prime Surefooted anyway, but in case you don't like Prime Surefooted or you just don't have it, I think it's fair to say being knocked down has never felt so good. Another little QOL that I think is really cool is that they said that they're going to visually showcase that if an enemy has a damage over time effect on their health bar, there's going to be a visual indicator on how much total damage this DOT will deal over its entire time. They didn't show any in-game footage of this, but the reason behind it is that you can directly see that this DOT is going to take out the enemy so that you can turn away and just, let them bleed out. The next change has to do with the Prime Vanguard from the Purita Rebellion. Basically, what they said is that they're going to rework the junction fights on the star chart by replacing the current Warframe Spectres that we're fighting with the Purita Rebellion Prime Vanguard. They said they're going to start out by implementing 3 of them, and then as they progress, they're going to bring in all 5. They said they want to make these whole fights a lot more interesting, and I think that's a good call because like these junction fights, they really feel 2013, let's be real. Next, another little one, and that would be that companions don't yoink your experience gains anymore. The way it is right now is, if you're attacking an enemy, and then your companion steals the kill, then you don't get any experience at all for it. However, going forward, this is going to be counted as a sort of assist, making it that both your companion and yourself will get the affinity. I don't think this has been much of an issue because, most of us have our dedicated leveling scenarios anyway, but I think it's still a good change overall. And then lastly, they announced there's going to be 4 new arcanes coming with the next update as well, 2 for the Warframe, 1 for the primary, and 1 for the secondary weapon. They didn't show anything about them, however they did say that they're going to get deeper into them in the next dev stream. And by the way, this next dev stream is going to be on May the 29th, which they already announced. They also said that as part of this dev stream, they're going to go much deeper into the 2 children of Jade and what that has to do with the story and the gameplay. I was actually kind of curious because they didn't announce any new upcoming Warframe, so could it be that maybe potentially, hypothetically, the next update is going to bring 2 new Warframes? Both Children of Jade? Or maybe it's like an Equinox situation where there's 1 Warframe but it kind of plays like 2 Warframes? I don't know, but it's very, very interesting and I can't wait for the next dev stream to have answers for those questions. And last but definitely not least, let's talk about performance. Steve, at the end, relatively quickly mentioned that Warframe is undergoing a big performance update, as part of which they did change multiple systems to give you more frames per second, especially on weaker hardware. First of all, they said that they're in the works of tweaking the look of metallic colors, where they stated that there has been a problem where if you make a metallic color darker and darker, it kind of sort of always blurs out to gray, and they're now working on a new tech where it's going to be possible to have metallic colors, even darker ones, but still being very saturated. You can see a sort of before-after with a Soulframe character in the background right here. This is a tech that has been developed for Soulframe, but they're working on porting this over to Warframe too. On top of that, they have multiple performance increases, one of which having to do with the Mesh LOD system, which basically is an algorithm that decides how detailed objects further away from the player are going to be displayed. Apparently, there was a bug with this where it always showed everything with the high detail, and they now made it so that further away things are actually going to be rendered in lower detail, which is the way that a Mesh LOD is supposed to work, and they said that this is going to give you a 10 to 30% increase in frames per second. And last but not least, he said that also the FSR4 technology, that's the AMD equivalent to NVIDIA DLSS, they're working on implementing that as well, so if you're an AMD user, that is good news too. Another massive shout out to Niels V, Demon Lord Cell, Demon Emperor, Emperor Prime, Lost Index Gaming, Turtlepeer, Underkaneo 2, Skylar Bowser, Mihawki, Socrates the Almighty Rat, Leo Morizaki, Shadow Lockhart, Han Tagas, Patrasader, Boomio1, Mr. Games Plays, Zave, Awindai, Azengen, Quax, Henrik5984, Blue Eagle 98, Hearthwheel, Everin 8802, Gabriel Tevez, Yaku Ivan Gonzalez, and all other generous channel members for your continuous support. We see each other hopefully in the next one, and until then, have a nice weekend.